Every year, without fail, I get a Valentine's Day card. I might be mistaken, but most people reading this are thinking, "Oh, lucky you," or "Why is that something to complain about?" And 9 times out of 10, you might be right. But I have no idea who sends them, and have spent a great deal of time trying to figure out who it is. It wasn't creepy when it started off. Getting a card from a secret admirer was a pretty awesome feeling. The first card came when I was 13 years old, right about the time I needed a little confidence boost. But then, when they started arriving year in and year out, I thought it was just my mom sending them or something. I confronted her about it on Valentine's Day when I was 16, and she insisted it wasn't her. I mean, she really insisted, saying she'd tell me if she actually knew who it was. I ended up asking all my close family and friends, but none of them admitted to sending me an anonymous card. So, cut to me being in college. It's coming up to Valentine's Day, and I realized that for the first time in a long time, I might not actually get a card that year. Only I did. Same style, same handwriting, same mystery person that must have sent it. But here's the thing. I had just moved dorms a week prior because of a burst water pipe in my original dorm room. But the Valentine's card was addressed to the new dorm room on the opposite side of campus. Literally, the only person in the world who had my new address was my mom. So, cue the second confrontation about the Valentine's card in 2.5 years, again ending with her violently assuring me that she hadn't given my address to anyone. So, the question remained, who was sending me those cards? It really creeped me out for a while, but it was something that I grew to live with. Again, it seems like such a non-problem, right? I keep getting Valentine's Day cards. People would always just laugh. I'm 33 years old now. In May of this year, I'll have moved apartments 3 times in the past 6 years. After my mom died, it got to the point where I'd move, and not a single member of my family knew my address until I told them. So, the second time, I ran a little experiment. I didn't tell a single person that I moved. Only my new landlord, the utility companies, and I knew I was living in this new place. I waited 2 months like that, having to pick up mail at the old apartment, keeping my address secret, until one particular day rolled around, February 14th. No other person knew my address, and I still found a Valentine's card in my mailbox. Later that month, I was showing the cards to my therapist during one of our weekly sessions. She pointed out the handwriting looked feminine. That's weird, I thought. I hadn't really noticed that before. She then noted that many of the strokes were similar to my own. I laughed at that and decided I needed a new therapist.
A few years ago, my girlfriend Sarah and I decided to go out for a hike on Valentine's Day. It's warm enough where we live to have a picnic even in February. Plus, she'd been leaving hints about it for the last couple of weeks. We both claimed to be outdoorsy, so a picnic seemed like a good idea to me. About a month ago, I was mountain biking and came across a good spot. It wasn't too far off the main trail, so it should be a pretty easy walk. It had a great view and was flat enough that we could sit and have a picnic comfortably. Behind the spot were thick woods that, even in daylight, seemed dark back there. In other words, it was a nice secluded spot if we wanted to fool around. Thankfully, the weather on Valentine's Day was nice. We parked just below the trail entrance, grabbed the backpacks with all our stuff, and headed off. Just as I expected, the hike was easy, even lugging the food and beers with us. Sarah loved the spot, so the day couldn't have started out any better. But, in almost a blink of an eye, that all changed. I was on my third beer when Sarah stopped suddenly. I asked her what was wrong and she said she had heard something in the woods behind us. I looked over, but I didn't see anything but the dark tree line. I told her she was crazy, kidding of course, and moved in for a kiss. Unfortunately, she wasn't having it. She insisted I check out the woods. Reluctantly, I walked over to the tree line and looked around. Honestly, I didn't see anything in there. And I didn't hear anything unusual either. After a minute or so, Sarah came up behind me. In a terrified voice, she whispered in my ear, "Right there, you don't see that shape? It looks like a person." I squinted and tried to see what she was talking about, but it just looked like a shadow from a tree to me. In my most condescending voice, I told her, "I think your eyes are playing tricks on you." By this point, she's nearly hysterical and asked me to get closer to take a look. I took a few steps into the thick forest when, lo and behold, that shadow moved. It was really slight, like maybe a shoulder shrug or something, but I saw it. I turned around casually so as not to alarm Sarah and made some excuse about needing my phone. She and I began walking back to our picnic spot when I leaned over and whispered that I saw someone. She almost began to cry as if some pervert in the woods was about to murder us or something. I admit, it was a little unsettling, but I wasn't panicking yet. I told her we better leave, just in case. I looked down over the lookout to see if we could take a shortcut. Unfortunately, it was just too steep. We'd have to leave the way we came, right past the tree line. Sarah was in enough of a meltdown that I just left our picnic items and started walking back toward the main trail. As we got close to the trees, I heard it. Footsteps and the rustling of branches. I looked over, and the shadow figure was definitely a man. Wild, unkempt hair and a beard were about all I could glean from the quick glance. My biggest concern at that moment was the dude was charging us. He was only about 45 or 50 feet away, and it was horrifying. I mean, I'm just up here for a romantic Valentine's Day picnic, and now I'm being chased down by some crazed mountain man. Obviously, I'm yelling for Sarah to run as I'm booking it faster than I've ever run in my life. I almost passed her, but had enough sense to keep her in front of me where I could keep an eye on her. We stopped to catch our breath in what seemed like a mile, but was probably only a couple hundred yards. We seemed to have lost him, or outrun him. Either way, I didn't see him anywhere. Sarah pulled out her phone to call the police, but of course she couldn't get a signal. When we got back to the parking lot, we found 2 police cars already there. Apparently, a woman was jogging on the trails early that morning and found a guy lying in a ditch beside the trails. He had been beaten, robbed, and left for dead. She called the cops, and now they were here searching the area. I told them what had happened to us and then led them back to our picnic site. I grabbed our stuff, and they searched the area, but they couldn't find him. I continue to check in periodically, and to this day, they still haven't caught the guy. We stopped hiking on those trails. I guess we're more indoorsy people now. And if I'm honest, indoors is a better way to celebrate Valentine's Day anyway.
Last year, I was enjoying my first year as a college graduate and living on my own. I was focused on my job and wasn't really looking for a boyfriend or anything like that. I began most mornings by jogging in the park, which was just a 2-minute walk from my house. Even though it was Valentine's Day, my routine stayed the same. As I was finishing my jog, I was approached by a very handsome-looking man. He was tall, looked in shape, and had styled hair and super white teeth. My creep alarm was not going off at all. He said in a calming voice, "You're very pretty, and I just thought I wanted to tell you that, and hope you have a wonderful Valentine's Day." Then he just jogged off. Honestly, it made me smile, because that kind of stuff doesn't usually happen to me. After all that excitement, I just continued with my day, like I would any other day. It was around 1 p.m. when the receptionist at my job told me I had a package. This was very strange, considering I had never gotten packages at work before. It was a huge, beautiful bouquet of roses. A note on the roses said, "For the lovely lady I saw at the park. I hope this makes you smile." Well, it did make me smile, which is stupid, but I also realized how weird and creepy it was. How did he know where I worked? Was he a regular in the neighborhood, and I'd just not noticed before? Very glad to be away from there and back at home. That night, I was cooking dinner and did some work from my home computer while I ate. I thought I could hear a noise outside my window, but I just chalked it up to the wind or something. I got up a little after 8 p.m. to wash some dishes and take a break from staring at the screen. Standing at the kitchen sink, I looked out the window and saw a car outside my house parked on the street. Admittedly, I had no reason to be freaked out, other than just a bad feeling. Usually, no cars were parked on my street after 7 p.m., and this was the first time I had seen this car. Again, there could have been a dozen explanations, but I just didn't feel good about the entire situation. It just felt off. That's the only way I can explain it. I sat back in front of my computer, trying to focus on work, but I had this sickening feeling in my stomach. As I sat there in the dead silence of my room, I was sure I could hear something outside. I had a window right next to the desk where I was sitting. I reached up and pulled back the curtain to take a look. As soon as I did, I saw the man from the park that morning trying to break into the window. We locked eyes, and he just stared at me like a deer in headlights. He did not have that same smile as before. He looked mean and aggressive. After only a few seconds of eye contact, which seemed like an eternity, he started to bang on the window and yell, "Let me in!" I screamed and ran to the other room, calling the police. He must have heard me, because I saw him out of the kitchen window, run to the car in front of my house. I couldn't make out the license plate. All I knew was that it was a white Chevy of some kind, which described about 1 billion people. They never found him. I was advised to stay at a hotel for a couple of nights, and then I drove home to my parents. I moved back in there. I never stayed in that house again, and I never forgot the look in his eyes, no more than inches from my own. I jog a different route every day now, and I carry more than keys in my pockets. I wouldn't stop me to find out what. It all started on the 7th of February. The small, independent coffee shop I worked at had decided to put up a few decorations for Valentine's Day. A few coworkers and I had spent pretty much our entire shift taping up pink and red streamers, writing romantic quotations around the edges of our blackboard menu, and other holiday-themed stuff. It was a fun way to spend a shift. But as I clocked out and began the short walk back to my apartment, I felt slightly lonely, knowing I'd be single and alone on the day itself. I considered Tinder and Bumble to try and bag myself a date, but the chances of securing myself a boy I genuinely liked over the next 7 days were slim to none. So I resigned myself to another Valentine's on my own. But when I got home, I found a pink envelope in my mailbox. I must admit that it brought a little smile to my face. A secret admirer, like something right out of a cheap romance novel. It might not be every girl's cup of tea, but honestly, it cheered me up, even if it was from a friend or the nice lady living on the first floor apartment. When I opened the thing up, it just said, 7 days to go. No romantic message, no kisses or hearts. Just those 4 words scrawled hastily onto the paper inside. Then I realized there was nothing on the envelope or the paper confirming it was addressed to me. No name, no address, nothing. I started to feel a tad silly, like, what if it wasn't meant for me at all? What if someone had sent their little Valentine's card to the wrong person? I told myself I was just being silly, but kept the envelope and card as I walked upstairs to my unit and got on with my evening. I honestly think I'd forgotten the whole thing by the following morning when I got up and set off to work again. But when I got home, there was a stark reminder that this was no mistake. Arriving at my apartment, I checked my mail to find another pink envelope inside. A small brown paper package was stuffed inside as well. Again, I am excited about the whole thing. There definitely hadn't been a mistake of address or anything. I mean, the person must have had to put all that stuff in there themselves. Maybe I really did have a secret admirer, and Valentine's Day was about to become something out of a fairy tale. But as soon as I opened the package, I knew something wasn't quite right. Inside was a small brown teddy bear, but it wasn't newly bought, nor had it been looked after very well during what was obviously a long and grubby existence. To be frank, it was filthy. The thing looked like it hadn't been washed in years, decades even. The fur was all grimy and matted together, and one of its glass eyes was missing, probably having been pulled out by a child some years before. The note inside the envelope was pretty much the same as the last one. Only this time it read, 6 days to go. That's about the time that I realized that whoever was sending these notes wasn't exactly all there, and what had previously been a giddy excitement turned into nervous anticipation. And the more I let my mind dwell on it, the more and more frightened I became. This wasn't going to be some dream romance. In fact, it was more likely to be the polar opposite. I told a friend at work about the whole thing, and they seemed to take it much more seriously than I had. They told me I obviously had a stalker, and that even if this person was doing this stuff out of affection, it was still crossing a number of personal boundaries, and I should consider contacting the police. But to tell them exactly what? That I had a note addressed to no one, from no one, with absolutely no other details than I'd found them in my mailbox. All right, it wasn't exactly the dream romantic gesture that I think all girls kind of crave. But at the same time, why cause someone the distress of calling the cops on them? That felt kind of cruel. But after returning home that evening, there was something else in my apartment, and I didn't feel so apprehensive about contacting the police. I arrived home to find exactly what I expected in my mailbox. Another note, this time reading, yeah, you guessed it, 5 days to go. I stormed up to my apartment, grabbed a piece of notepaper and a Sharpie, and wrote out something along the lines of, "Whoever is leaving stuff in my mailbox, please stop." It was sweet at first, but now it's kind of creepy. No more, or I call the police. I made an effort not to come across as too rude or aggressive. Still, I also needed to make it clear that I really, really didn't appreciate their unwanted attention. I taped the note to the front entrance of my apartment building before I went to bed, hoping whoever it was would get the message and leave me alone. On a bit of a side note, I get a shower before bed every night, every night without fail. I'm almost sort of a clean freak. I keep my bathroom pretty much spotless. So, as I finish getting washed, something small catches my eye. Something that might not even gain most people's attention, but to me, it stuck out like a sore thumb. A flash of color in what is an otherwise pristine white bathroom. There, on the window's edge, was a tiny glassy dome, just sitting there on its own. I approached curiously, peering down at it for a few moments before I completely freaked out and ran out of the bathroom to call the cops. It was a small glass eye, a minuscule amount of fabric woven into the back of it. I recognized it almost instantly as the missing eye from the teddy bear that I'd found in my mailbox. While I was on the phone to the police, I realized a few things about my prospective Valentine. As I said, I get a shower every evening before bed. I like hot showers. The steamier, the better. So naturally, the bathroom window spends a lot of time ajar to let out the moisture. Whoever managed to put that glass eye on the bathroom window ledge had known my evening routine. They had obviously been watching me for long enough to find the exact place to put something so I'd see it. But it was their method that really creeped me out. The way they used the small Teddy's eye to tell me, in so many words, that they were watching me. I swapped the note I'd written for one that simply read, "The police have been contacted. Leave me alone." And leave me alone. They did. But the whole thing had a pretty serious effect on my psyche for a long time afterward. Sometimes I'd find myself staring at someone in the coffee shop or someone walking past my apartment, wondering if they were my creepy Valentine. To this day, I still feel them watching me with that dead glass eye.
Thanks for watching, and please subscribe.